Hey everyone, this is Carrie for Silent Podcast, and we are here to start our coverage for the Celebrity Circle. And joining me today is another silent podcaster, none other than Geneva. Geneva, tell us a little bit about yourself since it's your first time joining us on the Circle podcast.
Hi, yeah. So my name is Geneva. I do podcasts for Silent Podcasts. So currently I'm doing Temptation Island, and in the past I did the Silent Sequester podcast. And in terms of the Circle, I've watched the US version. I just recently watched the celebrity version, and I'm really excited to talk about season 3.
I am already so in love with this season and just like the twists that they've come up with, because I did come into the season kind of being like, what else can they do? And they're already hitting us with things that we haven't seen before. So here is our goal for today, because you are listening to a podcast with two busy women who are out here trying to get those higher ed degrees, those terminal degrees, right? So we got homework to do, we got studying to do, we got papers to write, edit, depending on who you're asking, right? So we made a goal, because four episodes to cover is a lot, that we want to cover each episode in 15 minutes. I might allot us 20 if that's okay for the first one, because we got to break down like the player, the introduction. That could be a little bit more involved. But from there on out, 15 minutes. So this podcast should be a little bit over an hour, but we want to bring this to you like fast, dirty, quick. We're going to hit you with the hard stuff. And that way you can go on with the rest of your Saturday and enjoy, hopefully, the beautiful weather that we are having here in Chicago. I don't know what the weather is like everywhere else, but...
Yeah, I'm in Iowa City. It's not too bad. So 3.5 hours away from you. So
mid-50s, and my dog can sit on the balcony. So this is the best type of weather for me.
So definitely good. Spring is coming.
I need it so bad. I cannot wait for more sunshine in my life. All right, so I'm actually going to set a timer for 20 minutes so that we hold ourselves accountable, because accountability is a great characteristic for anybody to have, and we're going to model that and exhibit it here on our podcast right now.
Sounds good to me.
Without further ado, let's dive into episode 1. So we have 9 players starting off in the circle. We have 5 players playing themselves. We have Manrika. So Geneva, tell us a little bit about Manrika.
Yeah, so Manrika, she's from Birmingham. She's 24. She's a recruitment consultant and content creator. And, when she came into the circle, she was basically like, if she found that there was a catfish, she would use it to her advantage. You got to do what you got to do to get what you want. And she's going in to win. She says she's going to make notes of what everyone's doing, and she has a bit of a radar, and she'll know within a couple of minutes whether or not she's going to like somebody. And that's over a text conversation usually. And she says they don't always say to, don't judge a book by its cover, but she does. And she's going to be very watchful about, the way people talk about other people. So those are some of the things that she kind of said are going to be part of her strategy or general experience. I don't know if you had anything additional you wanted to add about her.
I think that's perfect. I can't wait to talk about her in future, like in our upcoming stuff with the future episodes or the rest of the episodes that we've seen so far. But I think that's great. So our next player playing themselves is Tally. And what do we know about Tally from her intro?
So Tally is from Worthing. She's 23. She's a doctor surgery receptionist or GP receptionist. And she talks a bit about in her whole intro that she said she was kind of an ugly kid. But then now on social media, she's done all this sort of stuff to get likes and stuff and uses all these hashtags. But she says no matter how many likes you get, it's not going to make you feel better about yourself. And she knows that going into the circle by herself is very important because her personality is banging and, win everybody over. And the other thing she said was she is going to pretend to be single. She does claim that she has a ginger flame in her life. But, I think a lot of people know that coming into the circle and being open to flirtation and talking and interacting with people, it's probably easier for your game.
Yeah, I noticed that everyone's either single or married. And I thought of like, if I was a player, I would consider how are they only casting single people. You know what I mean? Like that would make me question that just in general. So and it was actually Tally's profile that made me have that thought of like, someone's got to say that they have a boyfriend or girlfriend but aren't married. Like, come on. But whatever, teach their own. They get to they're trying to be the most popular. Our third player is Billy, and I'm going to chime in on Billy before you say anything. He was the one that I was the least excited about coming out of the intros. Just throwing that out there. I'm like, great, a 19-year-old boy. Like, this is basically my job being a high school teacher. That like, I don't need to watch them on TV too. What do we know about Billy?
So Billy is an interesting one. He happens to be a sports marketing manager at 19 years old. He decided to play himself. He's from Romford, Essex. He is a mama's boy. He's really obsessed with his sneakers or trainers. And basically he says he's not really clever enough to be anyone else. And he said he couldn't even get cast as Mary, Joseph, or Jesus in the Nativity. So I was like, oh, poor guy. But, you know, he also says, obviously, you got to be friends with everyone to be the most popular. So that's his main tactic. And he thinks he's got the gift of gab. So he's going to try and be friends with everybody. And he's not worried about, you know, getting rid of someone who's a bit of a threat or who will stir the pot.
Mm-hmm. Billy's trajectory so far for me is the one that changes the most. I will give that little spoiler. I've come to, through the 4 episodes, I grow an appreciation for Billy that I didn't think I would. So, but after the intros, I was like, ugh, please be the first block.
He also can't really cook to save his life. He's almost started some fires. It's kind of been bad. He's like, my mom didn't teach me how to use this type of stove and stuff. And I was like, oh no.
To be fair, like, I'm probably in the same boat as him as that. So
no, I feel that.
I would be Googling everything, but you can't Google in there. So I'd struggle. Our next player playing as himself is Andy. So what do we know about Andy?
Yeah, so Andy, he's one of, I guess, probably one of the older people in the circle, which is 34. I guess not even really that old, but I just
it's 2 years
typically
older
how
than
people are cast. Yeah, no, I just mean older in retrospect to people who are being cast, because most of the people who are in the circle are, if they're older, they're pretending to be older, so they're not even older. So he's a company director. He decided to play as himself. He's been with his wife for 14 years. He thinks that morality and integrity are very important. So he's going in to prove his children it's okay to be themselves. He finds it nauseating for a catfish to win. And he says he is a bit biased, but he thinks he's a pretty decent guy and hopes that comes across. If he has to call someone out on being a catfish, he'll be able to find a way to articulate himself while still being liked. He's not, you know, I guess, desperate to be universally loved, but it's a preference over being universally disliked, which, you know, I completely understand. I mean, you'd rather be liked than hated. And so he said he'll try and convert some catfish and get them on his side. He wants them to change their profile picture and announce they're catfish to everyone. I don't know if we're going to really see a lot of that per se, but, you know, I guess mini spoiler, Andy's really, really good at this.
Yeah.
I think he's really good at this.
Yeah, he definitely is good at just making the connections, whether they're with catfish or not, and kind of sussing out some catfish vibes at the same time. So our last player playing as themselves is Vithin, and he gives me some shoe bomb from US Circle vibes, definitely. But tell us about Vithin. He had a really interesting introduction.
Yeah, Vithin, you know, I was literally like, okay, they clearly have this sort of type casting going on, because I literally was like, this is Shuby, but not really. So basically, he is from London. He's 23. He's an accountant. He decided to play as himself. It was very interesting because he did some weird singing, and I was like, I don't know why you're doing this, but I don't know if you're just trying to show you're silly. He says he plans to outsmart people in the circle using statistics, because it is a numbers game. And he started talking about like numbers about how women are more successful with social media profiles. But then he basically says, like, I'm statistically probably the least desirable person. So people won't even think he's a catfish. So I thought that was very interesting how he was talking about, well, this is what makes a good profile and what makes a good profile successful. But he's like, I'm going to be the complete opposite of that. And he mentions the importance of Asian representation in reality TV. And so he says, it will be iconic if someone else wins, but it will be historic if he wins. And the one thing I want to note about that in general is like, I was actually pleasantly surprised and happy about the Asian representation with this season. I mean, you have 3 people in the main cast, so I think that's pretty great.
Yeah, especially because the UK has a very strong like subpopulation of Indian people. And so like when they were later in episodes, they were talking about like their favorite curry and everything. Like I didn't have my first curry until I went to the UK. You know what I mean? Because it's just like a common, you go out for a curry as like a social event. And I actually had like my friend's mom, who they are not of any sort of Indian or Asian descent, like make me my first curry. Then we went out and got, so it's like very popular thing over there. And so like you can tell that there's a mix of the culture, but clearly off of things we hear that there's still like some stereotyping, some like racial discrepancy between the like white population of the UK and especially the Indian or Asian population that this is a recurring theme, and I loved hearing it. Somewhere in my notes I was like, all right, let's go with this representation talk. So yeah, we have our 5 players who are playing as themselves, and we have 4 who are catfishing. So first we have Hashu playing as Uncle Saeed.
Oh my gosh. So Hashu, or Uncle Saeed, he is from Birmingham. He's 28. He's a YouTuber content creator. Basically, his game plan is to be someone older so that he can be respected and maybe even get some sympathy and pull on people's heartstrings. He's a sweet old man who just doesn't have the best English grammar, so everyone will help him and guide him a little bit, and then he'll catch everyone with their guard down. He's hoping to make people laugh. And he's going to make out like he's not intentionally trying to be funny by all the random stuff he might say. And also being someone with some wisdom and life experience, he just wants to be there to pick people up at some times. And he's sure the process will get difficult for some people, and he wants to be a support for them. So it's like, I think even within him being a catfish, he still kind of wants to be genuine, which I really like. And he is playing 63-year-old, which is definitely quite interesting considering he's 28. But yeah, I think he's actually been very entertaining so far.
Yeah, and I personally love how he's purposefully having like difficulties with the English, like putting the sentences together grammatically correct. Like you can tell that he's genuinely putting that like immigration influence on that, like English is the second language. And so there's like the grammatical mistakes that he's doing on purpose that I think is just such like a chef's kiss on his catfishing. So when I started picking up on that, I'm like, all right, Saeed, or well, not Saeed, Hashu, like, let's go. I see that you prepared for this.
Yeah, and I think the one other thing that I think is funny is he will also inhibit the voice when he is like saying the messages. And I'm like, why are you using this fake voice? But, I think it's allowing him to feel like he is really playing this part. So I think it's kind of funny to watch a computer. Yes, absolutely.
It's like what Bag of Chips was doing as Kim Woodburn in the circle,
yes.
so the Celebrity Circle, they, like the smoker's voice. So
that was so funny.
Yeah, I agree with you. Our next player who is catfishing, his name is James. He was a gladiator on the UK's version of American Gladiators, which was just called Gladiator. My dog is actually named after an American gladiator. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, like I can connect to this. And he is playing as 31-year-old nurse Gemma. So what do you got for us on these 2?
Yeah, so he his current job is that he is a strength and conditioning coach, and he's 47 from London. And he says what he wants to do is find a link with each player as they come in. He would look to find some sort of mutual ground to become friends. He'll take it one step at a time and maybe do some group chats with the girls. It's good to get them on his side. And he feels that if you get a group going that has a bond, then they'll tend to vote for each other. And it's in the latter where it shows that strategy of voting comes into it. I think it's also very interesting within this whole situation. It's like, well, nurses are very respectable. People respect the NHS in the UK. And so, she's Gemma is going to probably appeal to everybody. I just hope that as the episodes go on, he has enough knowledge about being a nurse. I don't know if he has a personal book or anything like that.
Nurse.
Yeah. Yes, because he was like, let me be more specific. And he's like, I want to be a pediatric nurse. And I'm like, I know he was trying to do that to be more legit, but I'm also like, you better have the knowledge to back that up, because you might be caught very, very easily.
Yeah, I agree with you. When he did that, I was like, I can understand in one way to pick that as strategy, but in another way to pick a pediatric nurse, like there is a very specific set of knowledge that, for example, if Tally has ever worked in a pediatric part of like a doctor's office, like she might have some inside knowledge that he doesn't. And so I was definitely worried about that as well for him, but he's a character, and that's for sure. I've enjoyed watching him so far. There's my gladiator Nitro barking in the background. So let's head over to Yolanda playing as her husband, Chris. So let's hear about these two.
Yeah, so Yolanda, she is a 30-year-old events venue manager. And actually on Channel 4's website, they said she's a dating agency founder. So I thought that was quite interesting. She's playing as her husband, Chris, who is 29 years old. And she finds that he's very chilled out, approachable, easy to get along with. And she's very competitive, and failure is not in her vocabulary. So she plans to use her husband's friendly, approachable look to lure people in. And with a combination of Chris's face and her personality, this will help her win it. She decided that Chris will be single and not married or with Yolanda, to remove suspicion that she is playing as a catfish, happening to play as Yolanda. In general, she loves to chat and talk, and she's a people person. So she is, excited to basically play this game, but with a different face, but use that similar personality and flair.
Yeah, and I can't summarize her better. I think you did a great job giving us a lowdown on both of them. The last person who's being catfished as is Penny, but she is being played by a father-daughter duo. She is being played by Millie and Jamie. So what do we know about this trio? Because there actually is like a pretty distinct reason why Penny exists. So what do we know about all of them?
Well, what we do know is that Jamie, he is 57, Millie is 20. Millie is a student. Her father is a relationship therapist. They're playing as Penny, a 49-year-old letting agent from London. So they basically created Penny together. She's a very likable, sassy, comes from the School of Hard Knocks 49-year-old. She's a great listener. She's had a slightly tough life. She's liked to have children, but didn't have them. She's empathetic and attentive. It's very interesting because basically they have this whole personality of her, and Millie's going to bring in the fun, flirty, feminine aspect of Penny. The dad's going to bring in the age, maturity, and experience. Millie has always disliked Jamie, her dad's partners, and Penny would be essentially Millie's ideal future stepmom and Jamie's ideal future wife that does not exist. So that was quite an interesting situation. And basically also the dad is basically like a housewife, as they described.
Well, those are our 9 players. And so if we're holding to our timeline, we got about 3 minutes and 40 seconds to break down the rest of this episode. But to be fair, the introduction of the players was allowed the first episode anyway. They have a brief circle chat where it's just like get to know you stuff. And then they jump straight into having to doing the ratings. And soon after we get the ratings. So I think we should go right there. And in 9th place is Penny. 8th place is Saeed. 6th place, so a tie, was Tally and Manrika. And then 4th place was, as a tie, was Vitham and Chris. 3rd was Andy. 2nd was Billy. And 1st was Gemma. Anything that stood out to you about those rankings?
I did, I guess, similarly as Millie and Jamie had noted, they noticed the older people were last. And I guess, basically the whole goal of, Gemma being the nice, likable nurse, being at the top, I feel like that kind of made sense. I know Talia was surprised Manrique wasn't higher. So there were just some interesting, I think, comments that were made, and people were wondering why certain people were where they were. But I also thought it was very interesting that there was that intention for James to not essentially put Vitham higher because he assumed that Vitham would be a threat and would be popular. So that was also interesting as well, and worked out, I guess, for Gemma in the end.
It did. I was surprised by Billy being second. And I thought that the Tally Manrica pair would probably be higher just because I feel like pretty girls tend to do well in the first rankings, and then they kind of get to let their personality shine through. So I found it interesting, maybe even strategic, that they fell to sixth place. So our first twist of the season is that it's not the two influencers blocking someone, it's a super influencer. And so only the first place person, which was Gemma, gets to decide on who's being blocked, and they must do it immediately right then and there. So from that, Gemma has to decide who she's blocking, and based off of catfish suspicions, she went with Chris. What do you think of Chris, aka Yolanda, being our first block of the season?
Honestly, I was disappointed. I really wanted to see Yolanda do a bit more with her playing her own husband, because I feel like because she knows her husband well, I feel like she would have been able to inhibit that character. And it seems like based on Yolanda being rated fourth as Chris, it was clear that like she didn't do that badly. It's just that you have people like Gemma or essentially James who figure out, well, oh, this is clearly someone that I'm suspicious of. And I think that's understandable. I think if you are someone that's kind of, I guess, maybe perceived as more generic, kind of like Penny is perceived in that sort of way, you might garner more suspicion. So yeah.
The first boot in any game is always the hardest anyway. So, I mean, you have to latch on to whatever you can. So I completely understand Gemma's decision to do that. However, we get our second big twist of the season, which is Yolanda gets to decide who she's going to go visit. And it appeared that she was going to go visit Uncle Saeed. However, she ends up at an empty apartment, and on goes the TV, and we get Emma, the host, saying, "You're getting a second chance in the circle, but here's the catch. You have to play as a clone of one of the players in the house already." Look at the timing. We just got to the end of the first episode. Perfect. Wow, crushed it. We're great. Okay, pats on the back for us. So that's where we end the first episode, is Yolanda basically having to decide, who am I going to catfish as? So we're going to move straight into the second episode. I'll lower our timer to 15 minutes now since we've gotten to know everyone. And your introductions of everyone were great, by the way. I appreciate all that information, because I was just looking for catfish. Like, this is a girl. This is a boy. So I was very
I know there are probably going to be a few people. I feel like there are going to be a few people who are watching who probably aren't even going to watch the episode. So just want to give them a sense of who we're talking about, You're
right. We've got some fans that are just following our content and not watching the TV shows. We are established in this community. So
yes, I love it.
Let's jump straight into episode 2. In episode 2, the first thing we see is Chris leaving a message for the circle, which we find out it's Yolanda playing her husband. And people were like, oh, that's unfortunate she's gone, but we caught a catfish. So after that, Yolanda has to decide who she wants to come in as a clone as. And after some sleeping on it, some deep thoughts, some reflection, she picks Tally. Would you have picked Tally out of who was available, first and foremost?
I think I probably would have picked Tally or Manrica, I think, personally. The reason why, I think for her, at least specifically, I think if she was playing a man and it didn't work out, I don't think maybe she should go back in as a man. I think it might be easier for her to play as a woman. And since she's interacted with these women, based on whose profile she feels like she could replicate, that might be a good idea. I think Penny could have also been a possibility because I feel like there's not much really, I think, substance to who Penny is. And we know that's because he is a catfish. So I think that would have probably been another consideration for me as well. But yeah, I mean, I think I would have probably gone down that road. I think it's just a question of who do I feel like I could probably more comfortably like talk like or follow their mannerisms. How about you?
I think I would have gone with either Billy or Gemma for two reasons. One, I think it's very easy to replicate a 19-year-old boy. You just have to have like basic humor.
That's true.
And you can just like play up being dumb. And the other reason I would have considered going as Gemma is, again, the whole like a woman playing a woman concept like you brought up. In addition, those were the two top most popular. So you could at least like mess with their place in the game just by choosing to be one of them. I also felt that I don't know if I would have picked Tally just because at the time I felt like she didn't offer a lot, where Gemma was coming in strong and Billy was at least clearly like popular enough to be number two. So I might have gone a different direction. However, I'm not saying my direction would have been the right one. I think that's just what I would have done. But she chooses Tally, and we get into something I'd never seen on the circle before. It goes alert, which we see all the time. Then it goes critical update, do not turn off the circle. And Billy goes, what the fuck is a critical update? To which I was like, you and me both, Billy. I have no clue. Like, what is going on right now? And clone Tally appears. So we have that instant reaction of like, what is this? And we get a little bit of a circle chat of like, what's going on? I'm real Tally. No, I'm real Tally. They quickly take on the monikers Blue Tally, which is the original OG actual Tally, and Orange Tally, which is Yolanda. So here's where I personally thought that things got interesting. They both messaged Manrika at the same time asking for a private chat.
That was quite hilarious, honestly. I was like, wow, what are the odds this would happen? But it was great.
And she, based off of rules that never really been established to us, and I've always wondered this, and I've always like half Googled it and then quit, like what are the rules of private chats? How many can you have a day? How many messages are you allowed to send in a private chat? Is there like a time, like a 10-minute time limit on it? Whatever it may be. But Manrika had to choose. And choose, can you imagine choosing in that situation? Like, I got both of these Tally pictures coming at me at the same time.
Yeah.
But she ended up choosing Blue Tally, which was the original Tally. So what do you think of Manrika's decision to just jump straight on Blue Tally's side? She said based off of the circle chat that they just had, she decided to take Blue Tally's message and not Orange Tally. And this is really just like establishing a line in the sand. What do you think of that whole situation?
I feel like honestly that was a very strong stance, but I guess she really went with her gut and what she felt seemed right to her. So I don't blame her for that. Personally, the way at least it came off to me as like an audience viewer was that like she just actively chose to decline Orange Tally rather than that she had to choose. I don't know. That was my perception when I had initially saw it. And so I'm just like, why wouldn't she, I don't know, actually message Orange Tally following this conversation and like do a little bit of investigation? Because it was just like, okay, I'm choosing Blue Tally and I'm not choosing Orange Tally and it's not Orange Tally. But I just feel like she didn't really do much really trying to investigate it. But I guess maybe she got from the vibes of Blue Tally and what she had seen from Blue Tally so far that was Blue Tally. But I think the one thing that was telling about Orange Tally was Yolanda actually incorporated information from the previous Icebreaker app game that the other contestants had played. And she mentioned, you know, I, as Tally, said that ketchup should be in the fridge because Yolanda, as Orange Tally got to watch that conversation in game so she could learn information about Tally. So she used those answers to actually get more credibility from other people because they started thinking, oh, maybe it is Orange Tally who's the real one. So I'm surprised that didn't necessarily make, Manrika think, oh, maybe that could have been, like, Orange Tally could have been the real Tally.
Yeah, and I also thought it was interesting that Vithin, as soon as the whole clone concept came up, he goes, oh, I bet you that's Yolanda coming in as Tally. Like, he hit the nail on the head immediately. But it still, like, remained a mystery, and he never really, like, shared that thought, at least with what we saw, with anyone else of, oh, do you think this could be it? But Manrika just being like, nah, blue Tally is my girl. That is it. Geezer girls, which I'm assuming means you're like one of the guys, like the girl that's one of the guys. I actually tried to Google this, and I should have messaged one of my my British friends. That was a full lack of responsibility on my part. But I really think that they both like pride themselves on being able to like hang with the boys but still be one of the girls. So they just like jumped into that hashtag and are now like conjoined at the hip because there's no separating these two. Manrika has decided blue Tally, ride or die.
Hashtag Geezer girls of the circle, as they like to say. Yeah, I mean, I was trying to do some Googling as well. And I think that's kind of the sense that I got from it. And it was just like, I was kind of like, you could literally make a drinking game out of how many times like Geezer Girl is like said in this episode and the other future episodes too. It's like crazy.
This whole cast hashtags a lot, and I could do without the hashtags. Give me more of their new like avatars, like their memojis that they get to use of themselves, and less of the hashtags. I don't need them personally.
Billy's was like terrible.
And he was like, please don't laugh at how ugly this is. I thought that was funny because it's like, you're not wrong, Billy. They did you dirty. So the OG versus clone Tally storyline really drives episode 2. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of who do you think is who, but we get some relationships that also start in this episode that really do come into play over the next few episodes, especially in the next blocking. So Saeed and Andy have their first one-on-one chat, their daddy chat. We get Billy and Vithin connecting, and we get Gemma really pushing for her alliance with the women. Also, Manrika and OG Tally, as we've already touched on, have established that we are the Geezer girls. We're here. Don't mess with us. So of those 4, which of those relationships intrigues you the most? We've got Saeed and Andy, Billy and Vithin, Gemma and the women, just all women, I guess, and Manrika and OG Tally.
Well, I mean, I think honestly, the Gemma and the women conversation, I think, was interesting because they kind of used that, at least I'd say, like, Manrika and Penny, and I guess even Gemma too. I think that kind of really helped them get a sense of who the real Tally was, because they had a lot of conversations about the tattoos, and star signs specifically, but then it was very interesting because I feel like Penny, so father-daughter, they were basically like, Orange Tally seems to have more warmth in her answers, Blue Tally seems more calculated. But then Gemma and Manrika are pretty much like, no, it's Blue Tally. But Yolanda wants to be cool, calm and collected in that whole conversation, and Tally's, the real Tally, is basically like, I'm not gonna harp on my answers because at the end of the day, my answers are the real answers. So it doesn't really matter what I say because I am who I am. So I think that was interesting, and just generally, I think it's to have the chats that basically like Saeed has, because like I've noticed that he's had, at least in this episode, he has a lot of like one-on-one chats or even like chats with other people where they will tell him something very personal. And then he starts to feel really bad about being a catfish. And he's like, I feel bad because they just told me this personal, like intimate information. And even though like, you know, part of this game is getting to know people and forming relationships and he is playing someone else, I think that's where he starts to feel a little bit guilty about not being himself.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely, that as well as Hashu is doing in terms of catfishing, I think he's also very quickly figuring out the difficulties in it, where you have to tell these stories that aren't true, and you have to, by opening up, like, hear these people's stories, and you're able to react, but it's not you genuinely reacting, and to then know that in the future you want to be friends with these people. You've all gone through this experience knowing that you've told these lies, and they've been so open with you. It's got to be like difficult to just have the mindset to be able to catfish. I definitely salute what he's doing, but I agree with you that he has found himself in a good yet difficult place, I think, morally.
Yeah.
I also agree with you that I think Gemma, first of all, I think James is doing an outstanding job playing, especially as a catfish. I think that he is playing a woman quite well. I think that he is making connections quite well. And I think he isn't doing it in such a strong way where it's so obvious that he's like on everyone's good side, because he keeps doing group chats. So it seems like while he doesn't have intense one-on-one connections with everyone, he is like good with everyone, especially the women. That I agree with you. I think that by James, the approach he's taking, I don't know if I would take that approach. I'm a big believer in like one-on-one chats. Never start group chats. That's gonna get in trouble in any sort of social strategy game. But I think that he's doing it well. So I agree with you on the Gemma part with the women. So we're heading towards the end of this second episode. And in the end of the second episode, the circle throws a party. No squares allowed. Great joke, circle. Keep up the banter. It made me laugh because, like, I'm a math teacher. So I'm like, oh, good one. Shape joke. Like, ha, ha, ha. And they, like, you get them dancing around, like, having fun, which is always fun to watch, personally. But you see that at first people are trying to avoid, like, the Tally versus Tally conflict, and it soon devolves into that. And we end the episode with OG Tally starting a chat with Clone Tally. So we've got a few minutes to sum up, or to kind of like hit the end of this episode. We got about a minute and a half. Anything that like really stood out to you from the circle party or the conversation that came from it?
Nothing in particular. I just thought it was very interesting. Like, Chloe and Tally was basically like, "What's your favorite party trick?" And then like Bithan was like, "Oh, I really love like doing the limbo or whatever." And then Penny was like, "Oh, I like crush watermelon between my thighs." So like, there's like some really weird, I think, like comments that we heard, or that people, or like answers that people like say, because like I think even the people who are playing as themselves too, I think sometimes, you know, they try to embellish a bit so they sound a bit more interesting and more captivating. So it's very interesting, like within these sorts of settings, to see like who is, you know, more vocal, who is more quiet, who's just going along with the flow. And I think, for instance, like I think even in conversations, I think, well, that'll be talked about later, like I think people are catching on to like Penny as a person who doesn't really say much beyond the surface level, and then just kind of agrees with people. So I think it's always very interesting to see when we are in these public group chat settings, to see how people interact.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on, it really is the beginning of us catching that Penny just goes along with the flow. There's no depth to Penny at all, except for like, I don't know, she has some quips, but there's nothing where she really says anything that even remotely seems personal. So I agree with you on that. We have hit our 15-minute timer on episode 2, and we did it for this. I'm so proud of us, because this was like a very like last minute idea of like, let's try to do this and see how it goes. And I think so far we're covering everything enough, and
it's working.
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, 4 episodes is, 1, a lot to cover, and 2, like, if you're coming back and listening to this, to have all that information, that could be so long that I'm proud of us right now. This is good. All right, so let's start the timer for episode 3. Episode 3 starts off with the OG versus clone tally chat. And personally, I think that clone tally, aka Yolanda, is relentless. She is ruthless. Like, she is just negating everything that OG Tally is saying. She's just like, no, I'm the real one. Everyone's gonna find out that I'm the real one. Just wait and find out the truth. If I was real Tally, I would be losing my mind. Like, am I going crazy right now?
She was losing her mind. That's what was so, actually, it was kind of, well, to me, I kind of actually found it funny. I know I shouldn't find that funny, but like for me, I was just like, I don't know, she would just shout at the circle and shout at the TV screen, and I'm just like, no one can hear you. Like, I don't know. I think sometimes too, people would be like, it seems like OG Tally's being so, like, defense, like she's like really just trying to defend herself and all this sort of stuff. And then with you have like Yolanda, when she's playing Orange Tally, people just thought that she was kind of like, relaxed and didn't seem to be, I guess, necessarily, I guess reacting in an over extreme way. And I think like in this episode, I think, and in like even like the 4th episode where we find out like where people decide to vote in terms of who they think is the real Tally, I think people start to think that Orange Tally could be real because they're just noticing like the behavioral differences. And sometimes I guess when people find that people are lying, they're just gonna do like, say a lot of things and go over the top. So I think people kind of notice that too in a lot of interactions.
Yeah, I do think that I completely understood why OG Tally was so upset. I know that I would have been very angry very quickly. That's just like a weird conversation to have. I don't even know if I would have initiated the conversation, to be honest, because what really comes of it? That person's going to admit to you that they're lying, but it doesn't do you any good because it's a private chat. So
you can't share it. Yeah, you can't even share the messages.
You can't
so it's like, what's the point?
And send
and it's
it
like, they're not real. So what are you?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So especially if there's like a limit on the private chats and stuff, using that to me seems like a waste. But again, there isn't a lot of like clarification on those rules. So maybe they even like left you have a free chat to message the person who's pretending to be you. You aren't wasting one of your private chats for the day. We spent a lot of the next part of the episode just getting private chats and group chats between players, which we get a lot of relationship building here, and a lot of key things comes out to really, it's not just like, hey, what's up? It's deeper things. We have Manrika and Vithin, and that's where we get that Indian Asian representation conversation that we had talked about earlier in our podcast. We have Saeed and Vithin. We get Gemma and the women again. Gemma and the women is a reoccurring theme in these episodes. We get the daddy chat back, Andy and Saeed, and then we have Andy and Manrika also having a one-on-one as well. So any of those conversations you want to mention, anything in particular about, anything special about any of them?
There actually also was another conversation that happened, and I believe it was between Billy and OG Tally. So they were actually trying to bond over like football, and so they were talking about how OG Tally was saying, like, how they have the commonality of West Ham, and I thought it was really funny that they both had like, well, Billy had a remote control mouse and OG Tally had a remote control car. So they basically raced each other like around their apartment. So I thought that was kind of funny, considering like they were not necessarily, I guess in person. And I don't know. I think in general, like I just liked a lot of the conversations, and I feel like especially something that you generally see culturally, I think in a lot of especially like minority populations, is kind of just, you have people who aren't necessarily related to you tend to be like aunts, uncles, nieces, cousins. So we saw that a lot with Manrika and Vithun. And we saw that with Saeed too. Like, uncle is here for you, that sort of stuff. And Gemma and the women, that constant talk about orange and blue Tally. And Gemma mentions blue Tally has to be real because she mentioned the tattoo first. and gave the details about that first, which I think, that is definitely a realistic, I think, reason to think that Blue Tally is real. Yeah, and I think, I don't know, it's very interesting because I feel like Manrika seems to have a lot in common with people. I guess, I don't know, maybe a lot of them are from, same area, same region, that sort of thing. So, so she seems to form a lot of connections with people, which I think has been very interesting to hear.
So I think I didn't include Billy and OG Tally because this is my thinking. I listed this on my notes as relationship building, and I didn't find it as relationship building because Billy voted to block Blue Tally at the end of it. So I think that's why I didn't put it. I think, and I'm like, why didn't I list this? And then I think that's my reasoning. So that's how my brain works. So there's some insight on how this noggin's working.
Well, this is the thing too. I think about it though is like, because it wasn't like Yolanda, I still think in a sense it is relationship building, because I think Billy, even though Billy voted against Tally, I think he still generally enjoyed that, and he's probably going to remember that. So we'll see what happens beyond episode 4 and see if any of what their relationship will be like moving forward. But I just thought that was like a funny moment, so that's why I just decided to include it in the conversation.
It did. I did make these notes post watching all 4 episodes, which does show some bias. You are correct on that one. So if I include in my extensive notes, but in terms of these conversations, the one that really struck a chord with me in terms of gameplay and personal connection was Andy and Manrika, because Andy went into that conversation kind of being like, I don't need this girl in this game. The sooner she's out, the better. And by the end of it, Andy's like, I will protect her at all costs. So I also thought it was very interesting that Manrika did not make that transition happen in a gamey way at all. She came into it just being very open, very vulnerable with him. And Andy did a full 180 on his opinion, which I think that shows a couple of things. I think it shows that Manrika is willing to be open and understands that the connections and relationships are what gets you farther in this game. And second, I think it shows that Andy has an open enough mindset to be a good player in this game that like his opinions can change based off the information he gets. He's not going to learn something episode 1 and hold on to that grudge through the whole season. So I really liked that conversation because I thought it showed a lot of layers to this game that like are reasons I appreciate the circle so much.
Yeah, I agree. I think Andy's pretty adaptable with his gameplay and just perception on how the game is. And I think seems pretty open to really honestly getting to know everybody. And before, I mean, I'm sure I'd say that he generally has a really good mindset on figuring out who's real and who's not. But I think he's still trying to gather all the information necessarily before he like comes to a conclusion. Because I think even in this episode and like the next episode, like he's like, I thought it was Blue Tally, but now I'm thinking it's Orange Tally. So like, I think he really thinks about it. And I think that's one thing that I do appreciate about Andy, and I've found him enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. So our next part of the episode, we get the alert that they need to do the rankings, but of course, another curveball. So for these rankings, the tallies can't be ranked. They are immune from being blocked this time. However, they are allowed to rank people. So we get the rankings happening, and soon after, we get the results. In 6th place for a tie is Gemma and Billy. So Gemma and Billy dropped from numbers 1 and 2 to tied in last place. Then we have 5th Manrika, 4th Penny, 3rd Vithin, 2nd Andy, and 1st Uncle Saeed. So anything you took away from those rankings?
People were being very strategic. They're like, we are not letting Billy or Gemma near the top there for a second time. We don't want either of them to get a serious power influence. I think it's still very interesting that like, even though Manrika, is doing okay, she's still hanging down below in comparison to others. So I guess we'll see as things things evolve and change, because I feel like she is now starting, like, I think even more in episode 4, we are starting to see she is, forming bonds, especially with OG Tally, and seeing where things will go from there. Penny, I think the reason she was 4th was just kind of a matter of circumstance, and basically because people probably didn't necessarily, they put her towards the bottom, but we're also prioritizing putting specific people at the bottom. But, I think because Andy is one of the more genuine individuals in the circle, and he always talks about his personal life because he wants to show that emotional deep connection. It's not surprising that he was number 2. And, Saeed, not surprising at all either. I mean, I think it's great that he went from being like basically at the bottom to getting to the top. So definitely good progress in regards to that.
If I'm Manrika, I am pumped about my 5th place ranking because we see her making those connections. We see her that she is creating one-on-one bonds. And so if she isn't up in that influencer position, I think she's allowed to keep continuing to make those relationships with and like fly under the radar. If she's making those relationships and being number 1, that makes her a threat. Obviously, when she's an influencer, it's not her as a threat, but the next time it's like, we got to get her. Everyone likes her. So if I'm Manrika, just like the way that she's playing right now, I would be so thankful that I'm near the bottom, because I think that gives you a little bit more area to move around in within the game.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think one thing that she had actually seemed pretty content about it, because she's like, well, I moved up because she was 6th place the last time. Yeah. So I think she knows that like this isn't like necessarily a bad thing for her game.
And I agree with you that I think that there was some strategic ranking happening, because when you're 1st and 2nd go to last place, that's a lot of people being like, okay, they can't be up there again. Also, suppressing people mathematically has to push other people up, and that's where I think you really see Penny benefiting from, because I don't think anyone was really like high on Penny, except like Gemma was like, that's someone who will probably protect me. Otherwise, you don't really hear like much positive about her. So I think that kind of like is what pushed Penny more up the rankings, is not so much her earning that higher spot, but more the suppression of others.
Yeah.
So the last thing we get to see before the episode ends is Saeed and Andy have to go to the influencer hangout to make their decision. And some things that come out of the influencer hangout is that they both agree that they want to get a catfish out. We knew this from the beginning from Andy, that he is like team catfish hunter. He wants to be eating catfish for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He will fry it. He will fillet it. He will put it in the oven, bake it, whatever. He wants to eat catfish. And then they come to a conclusion on like 3 names to narrow it down from the list of people. Given I think there was only 4 people who could really be blocked anyway. So the 3 main names that they came out with were Billy, because he hasn't really given too much of his like own personal information. He's kind of like floating along. Penny, because she's more surface level. She doesn't seem like she's floating along as much as just like you just don't seem genuine. And then Manrika came up because she seems so good at this game. She's clever that Saeed's like, she's a threat to me. What did you take out of the influencer chat?
I think one thing I think that Andy and Saeed, they kind of basically emphasize the importance of credibility. Because I think one thing that was really good for Gemma getting out Yolanda was that I think Gemma got more credibility for getting out a catfish, like from that instinct. And so they realized that that is probably an important thing. And I think, Hashi basically is like, I'm going to say this because I am a catfish, but we're going to get out the other catfishes. But I think even more so, in terms of the people, I think them generally thinking about Manrika and us talking about her good gameplay and the connection she's forming. I do think that's an interesting consideration if that's how people want to play. But in my heart, I was really hoping, honestly, that Penny would be blocked, because I'm just like, Billy's genuine, but I can understand how Billy might seem generic, because you were kind of talking about how you would have probably played Billy, because as a 19-year-old, he's probably easy to replicate. But I just kind of was like, sometimes it's like very weird for me because I really like when they get catfishes out of the game, because most of the time I like to see a real winner. But like with the recent Celebrity Circle, I was actually really happy.
No,
Catfish win.
I hear that. I think that, again, it's like the catfish thing is very easy to latch on to as a reason for voting someone out, especially early on, because there aren't as many like intense connections. But we hit our 15 minutes, got to the end of the episode there, and we're on to episode 4. So we start episode 4 with the blocking. And again, as we've said, their main reason is catfish. They're trying to get a catfish out. So that is why they blocked Penny. And Penny gets to decide to go visit someone. So she visits Saeed. Anything that you want to mention about the blocking or the Penny Saeed meetup?
So I thought it was kind of funny that Penny was basically like, Dad, you got to get dressed up. We got to look good to meet him. But they were very intrigued. They're like, is he going to be real? Is he going to be a catfish? I thought it was super sweet that like Hashu gave Millie like a parting gift, like as they left. I just thought that was like, I don't know. I feel like it was just really wholesome and sweet. And I think just generally like when he saw Millie come in, like he was legit like super surprised and super shocked. Mm-hmm. He was like, no way, like you're a catfish. And then later on, like, a few seconds later, then Jamie, Millie's dad, comes in. And so then he was even more shocked. He was like, wait, like there are two of you. And so you guys were together the whole time. But, Hashi was super grateful that they were a catfish because he felt less bad. Because I know he was worried about blocking like Penny if she was real, or 47-year-old woman. And she was super nice. But in the end, he knew that he made the right decision.
So something that was interesting that wasn't part of the show that I'm going to suggest anyone who is following along to go watch, on the Circle's Instagram, they showed Penny, but Jamie and Millie sitting down on a laptop, and they showed them different snippets of the show and figuring out who is real and who is a catfish. And literally every single person they thought was real was a catfish, and vice versa. Like, they had the exact wrong read on every single person, and I'm not exaggerating in the slightest.
That's insane.
So, if anything, like, I didn't think that they were adding that much to the show in terms of like entertainment purposes anyway, but also I think they got rid of like the worst game player in there. So I'm not upset that Penny's blocked. Like, this is nothing that really bothers me that much. So next we get the newsfeed Penny's video, and she, aka they, imply that they visited a catfish. They didn't say who. And that obviously gets everybody like, oh, who could they have gone and seen or whatever. And Saeed takes it in like I got to deflect. I have to make it seem like they went and saw Andy or Manrika. He throughout the episode, he keeps that in mind, which again, I think shows the level of play that he has as a catfish. He's really impressing me with what he's doing. And then we get more one-on-one and group chats. So I put this as more relationships being created and nurtured. So I feel like the nurtured is really following up on some previous ones. We have Manrika and OG Tally, Billy and Manrika chat a little bit, Gemma and Saeed, and Manrika and Saeed. So out of those conversations or any other ones that might have happened that I forgot to list, which ones really had an effect on what you thought happened later in the game, or something that you think is worth pointing out?
I thought that a good conversation was between, actually, I think both of them involve Saeed. So I think just Hashi was just doing a really great job.
Yeah.
One was Gemma and Saeed. And I think, they both have the commonality now of being essentially the influencer and having the opportunity to send somebody home. And they both sent someone home successfully. So I think definitely having that bonding moment and talking about what they did and what they managed to do, but also Gemma mentioning like some of her conversations on who like she thinks the catfish, could be. I think, I kind of relates to what happens later in the episode. And similarly, Manrika and Saeed forming, that sort of uncle niece relationship. Manrika opening up about her family and her parents. And that's kind of another moment where, Saeed Hashi feels really bad and about playing as a catfish, and lying to people and saying he's somebody he's not when people are opening up and being vulnerable.
Yeah, I think that the Manrika Saeed one especially kind of puts a few things into perspective, because the night before, when Andy said I was going to come in here and say block Manrika, and then based off my conversation with her today, I refused to do that. And Saeed was like, whoa, okay, like, because I would have done that in a heartbeat. And then Saeed has that conversation with Manrika and is like, I get why Andy wants to protect her at all costs, because again, she opens up, she connects with him on a human level, and it goes from he was ready to block her last night to I'm going to protect her, and this is someone that I'm going to work with. So whether or not Manrika realizes like how well she's doing, she's playing this game, and it's not like she's creating relationships to the point where it would hurt them emotionally to get rid of her. And that is such a great way to play this, whether or not she realizes that's what she's doing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I scrolled down to my like intense notes so I could like check in on that conversation. And so now I need to find my place of where we were. All right, there we are. So the next part starts to rev us back up for OG Tally versus Clone Tally. It had thankfully died down for a little bit because I was hitting the point of like, okay, we get it. Hopefully we can kind of like get a little bit different of a storyline going, because I can't do this for another like hour and a half of my life. And the circle gods were like, Carrie, we got you. We hear you. We're gonna go down a different path for a little bit, but we'll swing back to this one. So they play a game called Story of My Life, which is a great One Direction song. I won't sing it because of Twitch copyright issues. But they show a picture of Tally doing something, and then both Tallies at the same time have to explain what's going on in that picture. So is there anything from that event that you took that you thought really helped one of the Tallies either way?
I think that probably the third photo, so the 22nd birthday Manchester one, I think really helped OG Tally, more specifically because like Manrika knew instantly where that spot was, and she knew it was very Instagrammable. Like even though she knew like from the beginning basically that Blue Tally was the real Tally, I think that's really what set it for her as clear. And I guess depending on what people thought about the first photo, the work photo, and the descriptions that Orange Tally used about it being cold and whatever she was saying, people might have thought that maybe that seemed like that didn't necessarily connect. But I still feel like Yolanda came up with some pretty good responses that if I didn't really have any context for who Tally was as a person, I could think that they were realistic.
I agree with you. I also think that Blue Tally, aka OG Tally, had an advantage here because in a lot of the conversations that happened leading up to this, when people were asking questions to try and get information out of both of them, Blue Tally responded first. And I think it was because she wanted to show, like, I'm authentic. I have no problem answering this first, so it doesn't seem like I'm copying. But at the same time, it always allowed Orange Tally to have the last word and kind of refute whatever Blue Tally was saying, where this was presented at the same time that it gave people the opportunity to just evaluate with no other explanation or questioning, where you could really like synthesize the information that's coming at you between the picture and the description. Where I felt that all the previous conversations, OG Tally was just so riled up by the situation that she just jumped at any opportunity she could. And it always allowed Orange Tally to just kind of sit back and be like, well, you'll find out. You'll see that I'm not lying. I'm the real one. This, that I think that might have been what benefited Blue Tally a lot out of this. So they have.
I agree, because Blue Tally too. No, I was just going to say that I think in general, Blue Tally was just like in almost every like one-on-one conversation she would have with people. She's like, ask me any question you want about me so I can prove to you that I am Tally and I am who I say I am and that this person isn't who they say they are. But I'm also like, they don't know who you are really. Yeah. So how is that gonna really prove anything? But I understand where she was coming from, because it's like the only way that you are able to prove that you are yourself is by telling people like about yourself. And she had the intricate details where she knew these photos because she took these photos, or people took them of her. So she knew what happened in those photos. So she already had the story. It required Yolanda to come up with a story or alter a story based off of what Tally had already said.
This is like me when I forget my ID. I'm like, call my mom. She'll tell you. I'm old enough, I swear. Like, it gave me some like vibes of that. Just like, I call anybody that knows me. Like, I will prove to you. My mom will tell you that I'm older than 21. Yeah, I agree. And I also, one other thing was that I think by Blue Tally being able to say the breed of the dog, I really think that solidified. I think it was Andy who was like, oh, she said the breed, like, or maybe it was Saeed. Someone would like strongly reacted to that. And I think that was like an important piece of information to give. So yeah, I think Blue Tally really gained some credibility through that activity.
Yeah. Well, that's where I think also quickly that I think that probably in one way, I think that's where Yolanda kind of regretted choosing Tally, because she was an animal person. And since she had, probably photos of her dog in her profile too, that probably also made it challenging, because Yolanda's like, I don't really like pets. And I think that's where you could tell like she was kind of a bit different from Tally, which made it probably harder to be Tally.
Definitely. I agree with that. We then get another OG versus clone Tally one-on-one chat. And OG Tally gets clone Tally to admit, yeah, I stole your identity, but I'm still going to be here. Like, still like really just taunting of like, you can't even win as yourself. Sucks to suck. Like, Yolanda was letting her have it, which I appreciated, because like it is a game. But I also, again, understand all the emotions. I like at that point, I would have been throwing things in my apartment. They would have had to be like, Carrie, calm down. Like this, it's going to be okay.
And then OG Tally's like, I'm not your hun. And I was like, okay, girl, like chill.
Got him.
Oh my gosh.
So then we get brought back to the circle chat, and both Tallys get to give their plea to stay. And again, it like nothing was really said there to me that wasn't already said before, of just like, this is me. It's so weird someone's stealing my identity. And then the clone Tally just being like, you'll see that I'm the real one when you keep me. Like, I didn't think that anything really came from either of those that was that distinctive. Did you?
No, not really. I think you could basically see some, like, they were basically responding similarly to how they had responded to basically everything in the past couple episodes. So it wasn't really revealing to me in really any way.
Yeah, same. So then everyone has to publicly block a Tally, and they go one by one. So I'll read them in order, because I think the order is a little bit exciting. Let me scroll down to the bottom of my notes. Come on, Care, get there faster. All right, so first we get Manrika. No surprise here. Manrika wants to block Orange Tally. Billy blocks Blue Tally. Do you think that Billy genuinely believed Orange Tally is the real Tally, or do you think that he was being strategic here?
I think it was two things. I think he actually just liked the personality of Orange Tally better, and I think would rather interact with Orange Tally. And I also think that it was probably strategic as well, because at the end of the day, I think if you know someone is a catfish, they'll probably be an easy elimination later. Also, this is a person you could bring to bring to your side, because they may not necessarily have people who believe them or who have allies. Like, for example, like if depending on who, let's say this whole situation worked out in a different way, if the majority of those people who voted for Orange Tally, like they will have Orange Tally as allies. So I think that that was probably partially strategic, but I also think that he just seemed to like Orange Tally more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know if Billy has, I think Billy has some tactics to him, but I don't know if he got like that deep with it. I think he just liked Orange Tally more than he liked Blue Tally. Next, we have Gemma, who blocks Orange Tally, and Gemma very much saw through Orange Tally, almost as not as quickly as Manrika, but was right after Manrika. So was this surprising to you, or anything you want to add to that?
I don't think it was surprising. I think because of some of the conversations Gemma would have, and Gemma was kind of the one to be like, you know, Blue Tally would send responses in quicker, and would actually respond to whatever things were. So I felt like Gemma and Manrika seemed to be the strongest in terms of feeling confident about Blue Tally's or OG Tally's identity.
Then next we get Vithin. He blocks Blue Tally. So we're tied 2-2 here. Now, if anyone was going to do this strategically, I think Vithin could have been the one who was blocking Blue Tally strategically.
He was definitely blocking strategically. And I think he just enjoyed talking to Orange Tally a bit more. And I kind of wish in some ways that people did vote strategically rather than for whether the person was real or not, because I think you really could use that to your advantage in the game.
I didn't even think of voting strategically until the host kind of implied it. She was like, and like, who do you want to keep around or something like, or like, who is it like better to keep around? And I could, as a viewer, I think I was so emotionally invested in the, like, someone stealing someone else's identity and the conflict that happened there, that it wouldn't have been until the host made that comment that I would have taken the step back and been like, oh, shoot, am I doing what's best for my game here right now? I would not have thought of that, I don't think, unless someone else had brought it up. And it, as a viewer, someone who like in these social strategy games, I like to veer more on the side of strategy than social. It took that for me to be like, oh shit, would it be better to get rid of the OG tally, knowing that the other tally is fake? But I can understand getting caught up in, and especially there's been that whole get rid of the catfish thing. So I think that could like counterbalance the strategy part of it. The other thing that surprised me about Vithin was him going against Manrika, because I think that they had created a good bond. And so to have different votes on that, I could see like voting with Manrika to kind of show some allegiance there, because if Orange Tally gets blocked and Blue Tally comes back, that's a duo right there, that if you're like kind of linked to it, that's more numbers. So I don't know. I guess that also surprised me out of Vithin.
I mean, I think another thing could be that Vithin was probably thinking that I think it became pretty apparent that OG Tally has a relationship with Manrika. So by voting the other Tally, he could be closer to Manrika.
He could slide in. Yeah. There's definitely like benefits and cons to both. Yeah. And then Saeed and Andy both block Orange Tally. So OG Tally remains, and Clone Tally is blocked yet again. Sorry, Yolanda. You've had 2 chances now. And we end the episode with Yolanda having to choose to see someone, and we don't get to see the actual meeting, but Yolanda walks in to Tally's apartment and we just see their facial expressions. I am so excited for the next episode.
Me too. I think it was really funny because, like, I think Tally, because now we don't need to say OG versus, whatever. But Tally was basically like, I'm going to come after, this Orange Tally person and da-da-da-da, whoever they are and whatever. And then like then all of a sudden when she saw Yolanda, she was like Like, no
Jaw
way. Like,
drop, yeah.
I cannot believe, because I don't think that's definitely not who she was expecting. I think she was just expecting to be some random stranger that she doesn't know, and that's why. But I think probably even more so, I think their conversation's probably going to be even more interesting, and I think she'll maybe have a better understanding for why she was catfished because it happened to be someone who had interacted with her in the circle.
Yeah. Leave it to the circle to leave us on such a good cliffhanger. They are the masters of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that brings us to the end of episode 4. We did go a little over the 15 minutes, but I thought that was worthwhile breakdown for us with that whole ending of the Tally versus Tally storyline. I'm thankful it's done. It was a fun little storyline for the beginning of the season. Definitely something different we haven't seen on at least the English speaking versions of The Circle. I haven't watched Brazil or France because me and subtitles just don't get along.
It's not on the Brazilian version. I watched that with the subtitles. It's a little difficult if you don't know Portuguese because I don't know Portuguese. But
I don't know Portuguese.
it was a good season. I enjoyed it.
I don't know Portuguese. I can barely read English. I'm not a subtitles. No, it's just so hard for me to given now that I'm podcasting about it, I give a lot, I focus my attention because I'm taking notes at the same time as I'm watching. Mm-hmm. But to just sit and read something while I'm watching, I want to be doing other things. I think I'm a good multitasker. I'm probably not, but I just can't do it. So at least in the English speaking ones, we've never seen that clone concept before. Very cool concept. I'm glad the storyline's over. I'm happy for OG Tally that she persevered and won. Kind of sucks that Yolanda's out already. I think that she'd be a fun character to have around.
Yeah, I actually kind of in some ways wish Yolanda came in as herself. I get that she wanted to come in as her husband, and then she had, I don't know, I think for me it was a little sad that it's she had to play a cat. She played a catfish twice, and then she failed both times, and then she's out. So I think I wonder what her experience would have been like if she came in initially as herself and how she would have done in the circle.
I think these first 3 blockings show how hard it is to be a catfish in the circle. All 3 have been catfish. I think you have some exceptional catfish playing happening right now. I think Gemma and Saeed are crushing it. However, you can see how easy it is to see through a facade with someone like Penny who doesn't really offer much. And I think that Yolanda, when she was Chris, was kind of trying to be too much of the boy banter and not enough depth where you have someone who's going to fill the boy banter role. That's Billy. He gets away with that. He doesn't have the experience that someone who's 10 years older than him like Chris does. So I don't think that you can really have 2 people who fill that same role within this little circle family. So I think that if she had maybe adjusted quicker or just found a different lane to be in from the beginning as her husband, we could have seen something different. But I really just think
maybe she should have pretended to be married and had the photos of herself. I think that could have still worked. I think maybe that would have made her make sense. But like you said, she was trying to play single when it's she wasn't, and then she's playing the inverse of herself, her husband. So I think it just in that quick time span probably fell apart. And then the people who were sus of her, like Gemma. But that's also the thing. Maybe the catfish sometimes can realize who the catfish is. And that's kind of what basically father-daughter Penny had basically said Jamie. So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
All right. So one last question before we wrap this up. It's going to have 2 parts though. So it's question A and question B. Question A is who currently is your favorite player in the circle? And then question B is your early season prediction out of these people, assuming that these were our final players, no one else new is coming in. Who do you think is going to win the circle? Obviously new players will come in and it'll change, but who's your favorite and who do you think is going to win?
I think in terms of favorite, I think my favorite right now to watch, I can say, is probably Hashia Saeed. I think he's my favorite to watch. I think the person currently playing the best game that I'm really enjoying their gameplay is Andy. I guess we'll see if he wins or if people will sabotage him because strategically they know he's playing a solid game. So that's what I'm intrigued to see. I feel like Manrika will get some momentum. I don't know. I feel like for some reason, I think I was bothered by her and Tally and this obsession of, I don't know, just the whole Tally drama and then watching them both respond to it. I think just bothered me, and I think I don't know. I think I was turned off by them a little bit. But now that we don't have the situation, maybe I will grow to like Tally more. But I think I was kind of annoyed by how angry she was about the fatality. But again, I understand that like Tally, like who wants to see someone pretending to be them especially when you were being yourself? Like that's really frustrating. But I just felt like I don't know why she expected Yolanda to basically say who she was to her. Like I don't know what the point of that is because it's obvious that it wasn't her. But I do think Manrika does have a good shot as well. But I ultimately think right now Andy's playing a really strong game.
I personally think that, okay, so my favorite right now I think is Manrika, and I think it's just because I can like see a bit of myself in her. So I tend to, with reality TV shows, really root for the person that I feel like relates most to me, and I think that would be Manrika. If I were to classify myself, I'm a bit of a geezer girl as well. And then I did like that. Okay, she stuck to her guns. She has picked like, this girl is my girl, and I'm gonna ride it out for her. I will passionately be in her corner, and like I really think that if you take a step back from like the gameplay aspect of it, just to have someone whose like personality traits is that way, I think it shows that she does care and is human, and that can like be something that she can use to her benefit later. So between that and just the way she's able to banter back and forth with them, but also knows when to kind of turn it up a notch in terms of vulnerability and being emotional. I think she's my favorite. She's my favorite when she's on the screen. I at least know that I'm either gonna like laugh or be intrigued by what's happening. I think that I'm stuck between Saeed and Andy winning at the moment. I think that Saeed could win. However, I think that Andy is the most likely to like remain the most popular because he is definitely coming across as the most genuine. So I also think that he has like more up his sleeve in terms of like, let me be emotionally vulnerable with you, that I think is going to make it harder and harder and harder for people to want to get rid of him unless you get genuine. Like I could see Gemma being the one to get rid of Andy. I don't know if anybody else, like I could see like Gemma and Billy being the two to have the backbone to get rid of Andy. I think everybody else becomes like too emotionally invested in Andy to want to get rid of him. So that's where I'm at. I think Andy right now is my winner pick, but I like anytime Manrika's on my screen, I know I'm getting some quality content, and that's what I'm looking for in this show.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for tearing yourself away from the books, the papers, and everything to come podcast with me. I am hoping that we will be on one of these little screens together again real soon. Our next recap is coming up Tuesday, so we're going to be covering less episodes because we'll only have Sundays and Mondays to cover at that point. And I don't know who our guest is yet. I'm kind of confident, but I don't want to release it in case, there's people hanging on to these very last words of who it's going to be and are disappointed if it's someone else. So someone will be joining me on Tuesday to talk out these next 2 episodes. So again, thank you for joining us here on Silent Podcast, where we're anything but silent, and we are looking forward to the next time we get to see you.